Not complain about what you didn't get from the work you didn't put in.
This short, direct statement is not just a slogan, it's a life declaration from an artist who grew up on the dusty streets of South Central, where Ice Cube once picked up a pen instead of a gun, using raw lyrics to rewrite a social reality full of injustice, poverty, and rage. Ice Cube, from founding member of NWA to successful film producer, from challenging the entire entertainment industry to becoming a cultural icon for Black America, never chose the easy path and never backed down from any conflict. But what made a man who's always composed in the media get entangled in so many disputes with friends, colleagues, and managers? Now, as Ice Cube turns 56, rumors of a blacklist of 10 artists he consistently avoids or flat out refuses to collaborate with have finally been confirmed. Each name isn't just a conflict, it's a scar in his turbulent musical journey. Keep watching to uncover the full list and the reasons behind each name. You'll be surprised. NWA, the fragments left behind after the dream. There are relationships that begin with music, grow with dreams, and break apart because of things no one dares to say. For NWA and Ice Cube, the clash didn't come from a heated argument, but from numbers on a contract and silences that were never filled. The time spent with NWA, the group that laid the foundation for gangsta rap and turned Compton into a global cultural symbol, was once Ice Cube's greatest pride. As the primary lyricist behind most tracks in Straight Outta Compton 1988, Ice Cube not only helped shape the voice of urban black resistance, but also laid the first stone for a musical revolution. Yet as the records exceeded all expectations and sales surged, 3 million copies sold in less than 2 years, Cube began to feel like a shadow behind the spotlight. What hurt him wasn't the fame of the other members, but the feeling of being treated like an outsider within the very group he helped found. When he saw Eazy-E driving sports cars and Jerry Heller, the manager, offering complex, multi-layered contracts, he couldn't fully understand, all while still living with his parents in South Central. Cube started to question. Why were those who wrote fewer lyrics and recorded less getting more? In a world where hip-hop was born from injustice, could injustice exist even within those who rose up against it? When his request to review the contract was denied, Cube left the group at the end of 1989. No farewell party, no goodbye hug, just the silence of those who once called each other brothers. That silence lasted nearly 2 years, until October 31st, 1991, when Cube released the song No Vaseline on the album Death Certificate. No longer a subtle reproach, this was a searing musical indictment no one in the industry could ignore. But what made it different was that beneath the harsh, mocking lyrics lay a wound still raw. No one writes such a song unless they felt deeply betrayed. No one chooses words that sharp unless they once loved that group the most. No Vaseline wasn't just a diss track. It was a final farewell, bitter and brutally honest, from an artist wounded by being misplaced in the dream he helped build. What's worth pondering is this: how could a group born to protest social injustice be torn apart by injustice within? In the entertainment industry, is talent alone never enough to protect someone from being left behind? Can any collaboration, no matter how idealistic its beginnings, fall apart without transparency and respect? No Vaseline wasn't just one artist's rebellion. It was a symbol of the right to speak up when all other channels of communication have been shut down. And as the smoke from this musical battle began to settle, Ice Cube's gaze turned toward a deeper root, caused the man behind all the contracts, meetings, and unaccounted money. Jerry Heller, the manager. The man who once said, "I saw them as my sons." Jerry Heller, the controversial manager. The conflict arose from the feeling of being overlooked in the very house one helped build. For Ice Cube, Jerry Heller wasn't just the representative of NWA. He was the one at the center of every negotiation, the person with the final say on money, fame, and career direction. But what made Cube skeptical wasn't just the numbers, it was how Heller, an outsider to street culture, seemed to understand how to shape a rap empire better than the very people who created the music. Jerry Heller, who had previously worked with legends like Elton John and Pink Floyd before founding Ruthless Records with Eazy-E in 1987, took NWA from small studios in Compton to the pinnacle of the American entertainment industry. Under his management, the album Straight Outta Compton sold over 3 million copies, turning an underground group into the voice of an entire generation. But rapid success often comes with questions that aren't easy to answer. Who controls the money flow? Who decides who gets more and who must wait? And why did the contracts Heler offered make Cube, the main lyricist, feel excluded from the negotiation table? In No Vaseline, Ice Cube called out Heler directly, not just to assign blame but to expose a power structure that had been imbalanced from the start. Let a Jew break up my crew. This lyric, though controversial, was not simply aimed at Heler as an individual, but seemed to voice a protest against a system where black artists often don't control what they create. But was Heler truly manipulative, or was he simply operating the way the music industry has always operated, putting profit above ideals? Heler, in later interviews, consistently denied all accusations. He claimed he had supported NWA like his own children, and that Ice Cube had completely misunderstood the situation. In 2015, when the film Straight Outta Compton was released, portraying Heler as a divisive and exploitative figure, he sued Universal Pictures Dr. Dre, Ice Cube, and others for defamation and misrepresentation, demanding over $100 million in damages. However, most of the claims were dismissed before Heler passed away in 2016. When Ice Cube was asked about his death, he simply replied, "I feel nothing." That response, cold but honest, may not merely reflect a reaction to a single individual, but rather a deep disappointment in a system that has stripped too many artists of control over their own careers. Who was Heler in this story? An accidental father figure to the gangsta rap movement, or a personification of injustice within the entertainment industry? In a world where artists speak out about inequality, are they themselves still bound by deals they never truly control? Common, a clash between two generations. In the history of hip-hop, clashes between artists are not merely personal disputes. They often reflect broader cultural and generational shifts. The conflict between Ice Cube and Common in the mid-1990s was no exception. It didn't stem from personal hatred, but from a song, and more importantly, from two differing perspectives on what hip-hop should represent. When Common, the rapper from Chicago, released the track I Used to Love Her in 1994, he never expected that his metaphorical lyrics would ignite one of the most emblematic generational confrontations of the post-golden age of hip-hop. In I Used to Love Her, an acronym for hip-hop in its essence is Real Common tells the story of a woman he once loved, a metaphor for the evolution of hip-hop from its poetic roots in the East Coast to its transformation into violence materialism and a loss of original spirit. For some, it was a nostalgic love letter to the art form. But for Ice Cube and many West Coast artists, the track was interpreted as a direct insult, suggesting that West Coast hip-hop with its gritty gangsta rap and rebellion had tainted a once pure art form. Was Common pointing the finger at artists like Cube as the culprits in the cultural corruption of hip-hop? Cube, who at the time was asserting West Coast identity with West Side Connection following his split from NWA, felt he couldn't remain silent. In the track West Side Slaughterhouse, he and his crew fired back aggressively, criticizing those who don't understand the streets, yet presume to define hip-hop. For Cube, what Common saw as violence and commercialization was in fact the honest voice of communities left behind, Compton, Inglewood, South Central, where music wasn't about dreams but survival. Who has the right to define what's right or wrong in protest music? Common didn't back down. He responded with The Bitch in You, a track produced by Pete Rockmello in sound but razor-sharp in message. Here, Common not only defended his artistic stance, but also cleverly questioned Cube's motives. When you use rap to make films and build businesses, are you still the voice of the streets? This was when the conflict moved beyond personal lines and became a deeper question. Should hip-hop artists remain authentic, or can they expand into new realms without being seen as sellouts? From today's perspective, both sides had a point. Common offered a more philosophical and reflective approach to art, while Cube represented the raw directness of lived experience. Their clash echoed two evolving branches of hip-hop, one rooted in social consciousness, the other in street realism. And perhaps it's that very diversity that sustains modern hip-hop culture, where no one truly holds the monopoly on what is most authentic. But what's interesting is, in the end, neither Cube nor Common allowed the feud to linger forever. Years later, they reconciled during a program organized by Minister Louis Farrakhan. That raises an important question in the world of hip-hop: could fierce conflicts actually be a way for artists to better understand one another? And that wasn't the only time Cube stepped into a creative conflict. Just a few years later, another controversy erupted. This time not from a generational divide, but from a specific accusation: plagiarism. Cypress Hill, a veteran rap group from Los Angeles, claimed that Cube had taken their concept for the movie Friday. But who really came first and who borrowed from whom? And is the line between inspiration and imitation ever truly clear? Cypress Hill. The controversy over music ownership. In the mid-90s, as West Coast hip-hop was establishing itself as an undeniable force, artists were not only competing over sound but also over the narrative about who spoke first, who thought of it first, and who deserved recognition. Ice Cube, by now a successful figure in both music and film, suddenly found himself embroiled in a public controversy with Cypress Hill, an established rap group from Southgate, Los Angeles. But what made this issue sensitive was not just the names of the people involved, but the core issue behind it, the ownership of ideas in a culture that was built on sharing and mutual influence. It all began when Cypress Hill was preparing to release their album Temples of Boom, 1995, while Ice Cube was finalizing the music for the movie Friday. According to Be Real, a member of Cypress Hill, they had invited Cube to their studio to listen to unreleased demos, one of which contained a track with a distinctive cannabis influence. Not long after Ice Cube released the song Friday, the theme song for the movie of the same name, and the chorus, according to Cypress Hill, was so similar it couldn't be a coincidence. "We felt stolen from," Be Real said in an interview. "We share to inspire, not to be copied." Cypress Hill's reaction did not stop at expressing dissatisfaction. They retaliated with a clear diss track, "No Rest for the Wicked," aimed directly at Cube. The lyrics in the song were harshly critical, reflecting the sense of betrayal from someone they had once seen as a colleague, even an ally in the West Coast rap scene. In response, Ice Cube and his group West Side Connection released King of the Hill, a fierce counterattack accusing Cypress Hill of being overly sensitive and dismissing others' creative independence. From Cube's perspective, he may have genuinely been swept up in the same wave of inspiration created by Cypress Hill's music, but did not intentionally copy it. Meanwhile, for Cypress Hill, the feeling of losing control over a part of their artistic idea, whether it was the theme or the spirit, was a wound that wasn't easy to heal. And perhaps what deepened this conflict was the personal trust between people from the same house, from the same city, who had once seen each other as brothers. This war of words did not last long. After a few years, both sides seemed to let things settle with no further diss tracks emerging. But what it left behind was a clear reflection of the fragility of trust among artists, especially when the spotlight of success starts casting shadows over personal relationships. And if the misunderstandings between Cypress Hill and Ice Cube could be confined to a creative dispute next, we step into an entirely different kind of relationship where the conflict doesn't stem from music, but from power and fear. Suge Knight, Power Darkness. In the 90s hip-hop world, there were names that didn't need to rap a single line to make others wary. Suge Knight was one of those names. As the co-founder of Death Row Records, the record label that propelled Tupac Shakur, Snoop Dogg, and Dr. Dre to stardom, Suge was not just a producer or a powerful mogul. He became a symbol of the blend of power, threat, and brilliance. And for Ice Cube, even though no diss tracks were exchanged publicly, Suge Knight's presence remained an enigma, both distant and close, almost like a boundary Cube chose not to cross. At the time when Cube was crafting his new image after leaving NWA, Suge Knight was taking control of the hip-hop market with an unmatched strategy using violence outside connections and an insider mentality to pressure artists into signing contracts. Many behind-the-scenes accounts suggest that Suge used threats to force Dr. Dre to leave Ruthless Records and that he was behind several assaults involving competitors. Some say Suge Knight didn't need diss tracks because every action he took was a warning that didn't need repeating. By then, Ice Cube had already become an independent artist, building his own career in both music and film. Perhaps it was this independence, along with the resilience he had honed through past conflicts, that kept Cube from being easily drawn into Suge Knight's world. But that doesn't mean Cube was immune. In several interviews, Cube avoided discussing Suge in depth, but always maintained a sharp attitude when speaking about power in the entertainment industry. Could this be his subtle way of acknowledging that some battles don't need to be fought with words, because their mere existence is enough to send a warning? It's also possible that Cube recognized that the power Suge represented, despite its strength, was fleeting. When Death Row reached its peak, it brought not only groundbreaking music, but also a wave of instability scandals and violence. It was a model of rapid growth, but one that left behind significant consequences. Tupac died in a hail of bullets. Dr. Dre left. Snoop Dogg also abandoned the throne. And Suge Knight. He ended his career with years in prison facing criminal charges that stretched from the early 2000s. Next in line is a name that surprises many: Diddy. If Suge Knight represented violence and direct confrontation, then Diddy embodies soft power control and silence manipulation through strategy rather than threat. The relationship between him and Ice Cube was not noisy without any scandals, but it still showed a subtle underground struggle between two major forces. Diddy, the one who plays by his own rules. Not every conflict begins with an accusation. Some conflicts are shaped by the distance of silence, by a glance over the shoulder at an industry party, or by collaboration opportunities that never materialize. The relationship between Ice Cube and Sean Diddy Combs is one such example. There were no harsh words, no sarcastic tracks, and no public disputes. But within the heart of the American music industry, where every step leaves a mark, that silence hinted at a different kind of conflict, a lack of recognition. Diddy is the epitome of transformation. A person who rose from DJ to become a producer, record label owner, fashion entrepreneur, and cultural icon. Meanwhile, Ice Cube, despite coming from the streets of Compton and being part of the biggest controversies of the 90s, chose to build his path with independence and principles. Both represent the spirit of autonomy and the strength of black artists in an industry historically controlled by white moguls. But instead of amplifying that together, they stood at two extremes. One chose to step into the center of the power flow, while the other stood outside, ready to criticize when necessary. Some in the industry believe that Diddy has never truly given the respect due to people like Ice Cube, those who paved the way for hip-hop to become a cultural voice of protest. In charts, award shows, or interviews where hip-hop history is discussed, Cube's name is sometimes placed lower than the actual role he played. Is it because he didn't have enough market appeal? Or because Cube, with his independent, untamed mindset, doesn't easily fit into the standard model that Diddy represents? On the other hand, Cube never publicly criticized Diddy, but in his statements he has subtly referenced the flashy extravagance without a social message as one of the reasons he lost trust in the new generation. Could Cube see in Diddy a form of commercialized artistry that he once criticized in his youth? Or perhaps it's simply two men who grew up in different environments, with two different understandings of how to win in a game that's never fair. What's certain is this: they both succeeded. But which success leaves a deeper legacy? Is it Diddy's limitless expansion, with vodka fashion real estate and hundreds of millions in assets? Or is it Ice Cube's unwavering commitment to keeping the voice of protest, even as he entered Hollywood and made family comedies? That question isn't just for them, but for all of us, those who observe a generation of artists growing up amidst adversity. And when discussing differences in their paths, it's hard not to look at Kanye West, an artist who once claimed to be heavily influenced by both Cube and Diddy, but then chose a path even more chaotic than both combined. Kanye West. When friends become distance. Sometimes not all rifts come from a major event, but are merely the result of small deviations in beliefs, viewpoints, and perceptions of the world. For Ice Cube and Kanye West, things were once very good. They showed mutual respect in the media, and once shared a common voice on issues related to artist rights and the voice of the black community. But over time, differences began to show, not in music, but in how each chose to define themselves amidst the whirlpool of politics, religion, and mass media. Kanye West is not an easy artist to predict. He is the embodiment of breakthrough, always finding ways to break boundaries, but also someone unafraid to step on old values to prove his own point. When Kanye publicly expressed admiration for Donald Trump, wore the "Make America Great Again" hat, or said slavery was a choice, many in the hip-hop community were stunned. For Ice Cube, who once wrote lyrics like "Fuck the police" and always took a clear stance on social justice, this wasn't just a difference in opinion, it was a significant deviation between two worlds of thought. However, Cube did not choose to attack. He did not write a diss track, nor did he use social media to criticize Kanye like many others. Instead, he remained silent, a deliberate silence embodying the attitude of someone who has experienced much. In an interview, Cube gently said that he did not agree with how Kanye views the world and that everyone has their reasons for the way they act. It wasn't forgiveness nor indifference. It was a mature choice, realizing that there are old friends with whom continued conversations would only cause harm to both parties. From Kanye's perspective, could the shift in his stance and shocking statements be a creative strategy or a reflection of psychological instability? Does he see in Cube a conservative figure too tied to the past and unwilling to embrace change? Or perhaps Kanye, who was once inspired by Ice Cube's rebellious lyrics, is trying to prove that he doesn't need to follow any mold, even the one created by those he once admired. What Cube and Kanye represent are two views on the role of artists in modern society. One side holds on to principles, consistency, and collective spirit. The other emphasizes absolute freedom, personalizing to the extreme. Who is right? Who is wrong? Or are both simply products of two generations too different to continue walking together? And then, as the story between Cube and Kanye closes with an unspoken distance, another conflict arises, one that is closer, more direct. No longer a difference of generation or opinion, but a clash between two larger egos, once parallel in the same generation. Ice-T, the pioneer of gangsta rap, once considered a colleague if not a parallel version of Cube, now becomes a verbal adversary. Ice-T, two legends reflecting each other on the hip-hop map. Ice Cube and Ice-T are two names that have always been placed together, not only because of their similar stage names, but also because both are symbols of the gangsta rap movement of the 80s and 90s, those who dared to speak about violence, poverty, and the harshness of urban black life when much of America preferred to turn a blind eye. However, after years of coexisting within the same cultural space, rifts began to appear. Not due to a specific scandal, but from a subtle shift in perspectives and expressions. Ice-T in many interviews has openly criticized certain aspects of Cube's career, especially when Cube stepped into Hollywood with family films like Are We There Yet or Barbershop. For Ice-T, who has always maintained a tough image and pursued hardcore music, Cube's shift towards comedy acting, animation production, or becoming a TV host felt like an excessive softening. It wasn't that he hated Cube's success, but rather that he worried when artists from the streets assimilate too quickly into mainstream entertainment, they may lose the original rebellious spirit. On his part, Ice Cube did not respond sharply. However, in his later works, from lyrics to media statements, it became clear that Cube began to emphasize the need to evolve, to take the voice out of the confines of anger, and that there are many ways to change the world, not just with a mic. One could say that Cube chose a softer path, not because he lost his rebellious spirit, but because he believed that if an artist continues to talk about pain forever, eventually, they won't be able to move beyond their own past. The difference between the two, Ice-T and Ice Cube, reflects two parallel schools of thought within the black artist community. One clings firmly to toughness as an untouchable identity, while the other flexibly adapts through different phases to expand influence. Both are correct, and both are easily misunderstood. In a world where the public demands artists to be genuine, but still innovative, can anyone maintain their original image without being hurt by the very people who once walked alongside them? Notably, although Ice Cube and Ice-T no longer appear together as much as before, they have never allowed their differences to turn into enmity. Perhaps this is a sign of maturity, when disagreements are no longer resolved with diss tracks or public disputes, but with a silence filled with understanding. We are different, and that's enough. Aries Spears, laughter crosses the line. For major artists, the line between criticism and offense is often thin. For Ice Cube, who has faced much larger forces within the music industry, it may be surprising that one of his most persistent personal conflicts stemmed from a comedian. Aries Spears, known for his sharp sarcasm and ability to mimic voices, had often brought Ice Cube's name onto the stage and TV shows, but not to praise him. Spears once implied that Ice Cube doesn't really know how to act, and claimed that his success in film came from a generous market, not true talent. For Cube, who had spent nearly 2 decades solidifying his position in the film industry, not just as an actor, but also as a producer, screenwriter, and director. These words were like a stab to the core of his effort. He was no stranger to criticism, but when the attack came from someone who didn't share the same music journey or cultural struggle, the feeling of being undermined became sharper. Ice Cube did not respond with harsh words or lawsuits. Instead, he left a few clear signs on social media. Short, concise tweets referencing those who build their names by mentioning others, or laughter that makes no one happy, but only echoes for itself. To the discerning eye, this was not only a message to Spears, but also a way to set limits on jokes that crossed the boundary of respect. Ice Cube did not let the situation escalate. But choosing silence in this case did not mean letting go. It was a state of clarity. He understood that once laughter is used to negate someone's personal contribution, a harsh response would only give the attacker a larger platform. Perhaps the most fitting response was to let his achievements speak for themselves. Oprah Winfrey. Silence sparks confrontation. Not all conflicts require words. Sometimes an invitation not sent, a name not mentioned, or a door silently closed can create a rift that lasts for years. Ice Cube has never publicly criticized Oprah Winfrey with harsh words, but through various interviews, his disappointment in how she, the most powerful woman in American media, treated him became evident. Oprah Winfrey for a long time has been seen as the holder of one of the most powerful microphones within the African American community. She has supported talents she believes can inspire, often avoiding images or artistic products that are too sharp or too edgy. Therefore, it may not be surprising that she did not invite Ice Cube, the one who wrote No Vaseline or Black Korea, onto her show. But even when Cube shifted his focus, making family films, participating in community campaigns, and producing positive content, the distance remained unchanged. For Cube, this wasn't just a forgotten name. It was the feeling of being denied by someone who had the power to shape the image of black artists in the eyes of a global audience. He once shared in an interview, "I don't need Oprah to like me, but when she honors many other black artists, those who came after us, and never once mentions those who laid the first brick, I have to ask myself, what are the real criteria for recognition?" From Oprah's perspective, perhaps Cube is a complicated case. An artist who once stirred controversy with a rebellious past, unafraid to push ethical boundaries in his lyrics. She has the right to choose guests who align with her show's image, and Cube, despite his talent, may never have been safe enough to sit on that iconic couch. Ice Cube, as usual, did not pursue validation. He continues to create works, build community, and let what he does speak for itself. But in a world where the value of art is increasingly defined by likes, television waves, and award lists, sometimes the silence of a figure like Oprah leaves a louder echo than any public rejection. Perhaps after all the conflicts, what people remember most is not the confrontations themselves, but how an artist learns to live with the feeling of being misunderstood by others. Ice Cube has never shied away from conflict. But after each clash, with NWA, Jerry Heller, Common, Cypress Hill, or even Oprah Winfrey, one still sees an Ice Cube who always stands by the truth, always steadfast in defending the right to tell his story in his own way without needing anyone's permission. If you find this journey worth listening to and reflecting upon, please leave a comment, share the video, and subscribe to the channel to continue joining us in untold stories from behind the scenes of hip-hop culture.
All data, analysis, and commentary in this video are presented based on information available at the time of production. The content is subject to change over time and should not be considered a definitive forecast. There is still so much more to explore: stories of resilience, legacy, and truth. Feel free to dive into some of our top recommended videos now appearing on your screen.